Fred realized he had committed the gravest error of his life, and now the owner of the facilities firm where he worked demanded to see him immediately. He rose from his chair and made his way to Bill Robinson's office, his mind racing with apprehension. There was no conceivable way Bill could have discovered his actions. As the accountant and general manager, Fred was the only one who delved into the intricate details of the company's transactions, ensuring that all the accounts balanced at the end of each month. Fred felt a cold sweat and a sense of nausea as he reluctantly knocked on the door. He reassured himself that Bill never bothered to scrutinize the detailed accounts unless there was an obvious discrepancy in the balance sheets. Bill was always more preoccupied with his designer suits, fast cars, and chasing women. As Fred entered, he saw Bill's serious expression and was immediately disabused of any illusion of safety. "So I suppose the question I need to ask is, how long have you been embezzling from me?" Bill's voice was stern. Fred's head began to spin. "What? I have no idea what you're talking about," he blurted out, his denials flowing without conviction. However, Bill produced the transaction logs, proving that a significant amount of money had spent some time in one of Fred's personal accounts before being paid back into the company. Fred knew the jig was up. He had been caught red-handed. "I'm truly sorry, Bill," Fred confessed. "I just needed a short-term loan until the bridging company came through. Otherwise, we would have lost the new house Lucy had set her heart on. I never intended to steal it. I paid it back as soon as I could and before the end of the month. I don't know what they'll classify it as, Fred. Theft, I guess, or fraud. But you could be looking at jail time. Even without that, you're looking at losing your job. I can't possibly trust you after this," Bill stated solemnly. "Please, give me a chance." It was a moment of madness. "I've worked for the company for almost 20 years and have never thought of doing anything like this before, and I wouldn't do it again," Fred pleaded. Bill stood and looked out the window, seemingly lost in deep contemplation. "You and Lucy have been my friends for a long time. I guess that makes this all the more disappointing." "Did Lucy know you did this?" Fred was taken aback by the question. He thought back. It was actually Lucy's idea. She was so desperate not to lose the house that she suggested it, convincing Fred that no one could ever find out. Fred thought involving Lucy might mean Bill wouldn't report it to the police, but he didn't want to implicate her. After a long pause, he said, "No, she didn't. It was my idea." Bill seemed surprised by Fred's response, but let it pass. "I need time to think this through. Fred, I'm not sure what to do for the best. Go home. Don't come back in for the rest of the week. I'll make a decision on Friday." On his way home, Fred couldn't figure out how Bill had found out. No one ever looked at the transactions, and Bill certainly didn't delve into details. His primary concern was which option Bill would choose. None of them were very appealing, but the shame of a court case and time in prison left him in a blind panic. He knew Lucy wouldn't be expecting him. He looked at their new home as he approached, deeply regretting buying the place in the first place. Suddenly, he recalled all those stories where a guy comes home early to find his wife having an affair. Wouldn't that just cap off a perfect day? As he walked into the kitchen, Fred was relieved to find Lucy her usual bright and sunny self, fully clothed. He couldn't help but marvel at her beauty once again. Just shy of her 40th birthday, her long curly brown hair was pinned up, her fringe resting over a pair of deep brown eyes. He found her figure more appealing now, with a few more curves and a lot more cleavage than when they were first married. But above all, he loved her smile, a smile he feared he might soon remove for the foreseeable future. Fred updated Lucy on his discussions with Bill and the damning evidence he had uncovered. "God, honey, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. It was my idea. All for this stupid house," Lucy responded. Fred shrugged. "I told Bill you didn't know anything. There's no point in getting us both into trouble." "Maybe if I spoke to him and pleaded," Lucy suggested. Fred thought about it and suggested they wait. He knew the next 3 days were going to be the longest of his life. They could try pleading if Bill chose to go the destructive route. He wondered what he would do if he were in Bill's shoes. They were friends outside of work, often going out and attending parties together. Maybe that would give him a slim chance. Bill texted to say he would come to their home at 7 p.m. on Friday. Both Fred and Lucy were sick with anticipation. Bill's Porsche 911 pulled onto the drive exactly on time. The man with everything. Fred mused silently. Good looks, money, the ability to charm, and now the power to destroy him. He greeted Bill with strained pleasantries, while Lucy offered him a beer as usual. Before Bill could say anything, Fred dove in. I just want to say how very sorry I am, Bill. I let you and myself down badly. I understand I've put you in an impossible position, and I'll cope with whatever you decide. Bill gave a strange smile. I do hope that's true, Fred. The following silence stretched on, becoming unbearable, before Bill finally spoke again. You know, Fred, I'm a bit jealous of you. Your relationship with Lucy, I missed that in my life. Fred was surprised. He always thought Bill had it all, including an endless line of hot girlfriends. Maybe nearing 30, he was looking to settle down. So it's with that in mind that I have a proposal. Neither of you will like it, but it's the only scenario where you can avoid a prison sentence. Fred. And remember, there's a risk to Lucy as well, as it was a joint account, and used to secure the house in both your names. Also, I know you wouldn't have done this without her approval. Fred panicked at the thought of Lucy being held accountable. He had no idea what the proposal could possibly involve. Bill let out a slow, long breath. There's no easy way to say this, but my proposal involves me spending time with Lucy. There was stunned silence. Bill continued, no police, no court cases or prison. You stay employed, and you two stay together, but I get to spend every Friday night with her. You can't possibly be serious, whispered Fred. I'm deadly serious. I've desired Lucy for all these years, and this is an opportunity I just can't resist, Bill said. Lucy interjected, there must be another option. We can pay more back, anything but. This is my only offer, Bill interrupted. I'm told I'm not a bad-looking guy. Hopefully, it won't be too much of a hardship for you. Maybe once things settle down, the arrangement won't be too uncomfortable for any of us. We need time to consider it. We can't decide something like this quickly, Lucy said. Fred's head spun around. You can't be thinking of agreeing to this, babe. Are you crazy? I don't see any alternatives, Fred, and we've been trying to think of them all week, Lucy replied. Fred seethed as he looked at Bill. You miserable low-life scum. It's a sick idea. Bill smiled. That may be true, Fred, but I'm not a thief. You are, though. Turning to Lucy, Bill said, if we're doing this, we need to start now. No time for you to think of a way to squirm out of it. After 15 minutes of shouting and accusations, Bill stood up. It's decision time. I'm either walking out to my car or upstairs with Lucy, he said, holding out his hand towards her. After a hesitation, Lucy took it. Fred was literally staggered and sat back harshly on the chair. There's no alternative. Fred. It will be okay, Lucy said, then led Bill through the living room and up the stairs. Time seemed to stop for Fred. There was a frightening silence in the room. Had this conversation really just happened? His thoughts jumped to what was happening upstairs. He heard them moving around, a muffled conversation, and then the distinct sound of someone sitting on the bed. Long minutes passed in silence. Then he heard the first creak of the bed, the unmistakable sound of two people lying on it. The movements and sounds continued. Then the creaking became regular, faster and louder. There seemed to be no end to it, and Fred thought he might go mad. Then the sound stopped, and that meant only one thing. Bill had achieved his goal. Fred felt overwhelmed by shame and guilt as he dried his cheeks and eyes, expecting Bill and Lucy to return downstairs. Again, there was muffled conversation and movement. After a long silence, Fred stood, thinking he should check if Lucy was okay, when he heard something again, the bed squeaking. He had to get out of the house. He rushed out and walked aimlessly. Was Lucy actually enjoying it, or was she putting on a show for Bill? He started to wonder how vigorously she had argued against the idea. The fact that Bill was 10 years his junior and handsome wasn't lost on him. By the time he reached the park, his thoughts had changed. Lucy was doing this to keep him out of jail. He needed to get back to the house, and as much as possible, make sure she was okay. The Porsche was still there, but the house was quiet as he entered. He went through to the kitchen and grabbed a beer. Turning, he saw Lucy behind him in a short robe. They looked at each other, both embarrassed, before Fred managed to speak. "Are you okay?" Lucy gave a flicker of a smile. "I am. Thanks for checking," she said, then continued. "He's acting normal, nothing rude or weird. I'm sorry if you could hear things." Fred shrugged. "At least it's over." Lucy looked awkward. Actually, he wants to go again. He was thirsty, so I came for a beer, and I wanted to check on you." "Jesus, he must have been saving this up for you," Fred remarked. Lucy suggested, "Why don't you go to the den? It might be easier for you, quieter maybe. See if you can think of a way out of this." Fred spent another hour in the den, but he hadn't made any progress on a solution when he heard footsteps descending the stairs. He stepped into the hall and saw Bill, who was struggling to hide a smile before he spoke, breaking the tense silence. "Listen, I know this isn't easy for you. Fred, I promised to treat Lucy with utmost respect, and I really appreciate you allowing me to spend time with her. I hope it gets easier for you, and our work issues will remain between us." Raging inside, Fred replied, "Don't thank me. You left us no choice at all." Bill and Lucy both looked uncomfortable. It was clearly time for him to leave. To Fred's surprise, as Bill said goodbye, Lucy kissed him. It wasn't a passionate kiss, but it was on the lips and lingered for a moment. Before Fred could react, Bill had already left. He turned to Lucy. What was that all about? Lucy realized she had made a mistake. What? Oh, it was just a goodbye kiss. No, it wasn't just that. It was a sign of affection. I suppose you had a good time after all, and I shouldn't have been so concerned. Lucy grew angry. I can't believe your boss just slept with me, and because of your actions, you're worried about a goodbye kiss. Fred countered. It's supposed to be a deal, an arrangement. Did you make out with him upstairs? Some, I guess. Not much, Lucy replied. Great. First, it's multiple times. Then I hear you enjoying it. And now it's affection. Fred retorted. Lucy erupted. It's not like that. Everything I'm doing is to keep us out of jail. I have to show willingness and make sure he enjoys it. Plus, I can't help but react if he's doing that to me. It's not exactly something I can control. We both need to adjust to this. If I can put myself through this, then you need to find a way to cope with it too. Fred felt drained after the last comment. Despite his doubts about Lucy's actions, she was the one making the sacrifice, not him. If she left, where would he be? Probably in jail. Facing the master bedroom was unbearable for Fred, knowing what had happened there. So they slept in the guest room, holding each other close. Lucy fell asleep quickly, clearly exhausted. But Fred lay awake all night, his mind swirling with thoughts, desperately seeking the way out of this nightmare. The following week felt like they barely spoke. Their conversation centered on how to escape their predicament. Fred came up with various plans, most of them useless. Even when he thought of a viable solution, Bill always seemed one step ahead. Once, Fred suggested destroying all the evidence, only to discover that Bill had cut off his access to the backups and had backed up all the financials to a new secure cloud system. Finally, Friday arrived, confirmed by a text from Bill saying he planned to take Lucy out for a meal, suggesting it might be easier to handle. Fred wasn't sure if it was easier. On one hand, a date felt more like a normal relationship, but on the other, It meant less time in bed with Lucy. As it turned out, he got the worst of both scenarios. Lucy seemed subdued about the date, but she got ready anyway. Fred thought she put in too much effort and looked too good when Bill arrived to pick her up. Watching her in a little black dress and slingback heels, being helped into Bill's Porsche 911, was heart-wrenching. The evening that followed was even worse. Fred sent multiple texts to Lucy, asking if she was okay. Each time, he received a short response saying she was fine, just having a meal or drinks. They eventually returned at 10 p.m. Bill had his arm around Lucy as they entered, both laughing and seemingly in a good mood. Fred's glare intensified as Lucy appeared to be enjoying herself a bit too much, clearly intoxicated. "We never agreed these were dates," Fred muttered. Bill replied, "Relax, Fred, it was just dinner and drinks between friends. If this is going to be awkward, maybe we better go straight on up." Fred seethed. "What do you mean by straight up?" Bill's smile returned. "The deal was every Friday, Fred. So I'll be staying with Lucy tonight. I'm sure you can manage in the spare room." Lucy, despite her inebriation, sensed the tension. Worried Fred might confront Bill, Lucy steered him into the kitchen, whispering, "It'll be okay, Fred. I'll handle it quickly and then pretend to be passed out. We don't have much choice." Feeling powerless, Fred retreated to the den. Upstairs, he heard Lucy's giggles, hoping they were just for show, but he couldn't shake the thought that they might be for Bill, or worse, for him. Exhausted, Fred finally fell asleep in the spare room. Each time he woke up, he heard the bed squeaking down the hall. So much for a quick resolution. In the morning, Fred found Bill already at the table and Lucy making breakfast. He had had enough. "Back off, Bill. It's not Friday, and your time is up," Fred declared. Lucy started to speak, but Fred cut her off. "You have 10 seconds to get out of my house." Bill looked like he wanted to argue but opted to leave instead. As he left, he threw a reminder at Fred. "Don't forget what's at stake here, Fred." Fred turned to Lucy incredulously. "Making him breakfast? Really? You've got to be kidding me. Why don't you just move him in? You're more his wife than mine now." He stormed out before she could even formulate a reply. For the third consecutive Friday, Bill suggested they spend the night at a hotel to avoid further confrontations with Fred. Lucy left at 6 p.m., dressed casually, hoping to make things easier on Fred again. The plan was to change at the hotel, and Bill would meet her in the restaurant. Upon arriving, Lucy was surprised by the opulence of the hotel. Her casual attire seemed out of place. She picked up the key for the pre-booked room, only to find out it was a suite. A box on the bed contained a very expensive and glamorous full-length silver satin dress with a scoop neck and thigh-high slit. Though hesitant, Lucy decided to try it on. Surprisingly, it fit perfectly, and she couldn't deny feeling stunning in it. She resolved to keep it on, and headed down to the restaurant. Bill was speechless at how stunning Lucy looked when he met her. The dinner and wine that followed were exquisite, with a charged atmosphere, knowing what was to come later. Lucy found herself more at ease with Bill, deciding to go along with the scenario rather than resist it. Returning to the room, Lucy realized that Bill was an attentive and passionate lover, exuding a confidence and allure she had never experienced with her husband. The next morning, Lucy changed back into her casual clothes. She explained to Bill that she couldn't risk taking the dress home. Bill agreed to keep it at his house for Lucy to use in the future. As Lucy sighed, she recognized that this arrangement would be long-term. Her emotions were in turmoil, unsure of how she truly felt. Guilt was present, but so was a sense of excitement and fulfillment that she couldn't deny. Fred lay awake for most of Friday night, and by Saturday morning at 10 a.m., Lucy still hadn't returned. Once again, she had breached their agreement. Fred doubted whether Bill would have resisted taking Lucy again that morning, and he wasn't convinced she would even try to avoid it. Try as he might to resist it, he was losing trust in Lucy, and if that happened, it could mean the end of his marriage. He had never felt so distant from Lucy or so alone. Lucy reflected on the kiss that turned out to be a colossal mistake, upsetting Fred more than anything else. And then there was the breakfast for Bill. What on earth was I thinking? In fact, she was starting to believe the whole arrangement was a terrible idea. From her perspective, her time with Bill was easier than expected. He was respectful, handsome, and exciting, and the money and cars certainly added to the outer. She had always longed for the finer things. She had hoped Fred would adjust to the situation and come to his senses, but 3 weeks had passed, and he was still just as moody. She loved him dearly and regretted the predicament they were now in. She had tried to reassure Fred that she was managing, and he shouldn't feel guilty. She mentioned that Bill treated her well and wasn't trying to keep them apart, but it had no effect. Fred seemed defeated and lost. His once steady, reassuring presence in her life was becoming a distant memory. When Bill arrived at work on Monday, he informed Fred that he needed to cover an out-of-town training event on Wednesday and Thursday of that week. Fred's suspicions immediately arose, but given his precarious work position, he had no choice but to agree to cover it. "Okay, I can cover it, but just to be clear, this doesn't affect our personal arrangement. You can't visit when I'm away," Fred said firmly. Bill replied, "No, of course not." That night, when Fred informed Lucy, she didn't seem particularly surprised or concerned. While training events weren't uncommon, occurring once or twice a year, it all felt too convenient to Fred. He retreated to the den, his intention of planning a way out of the predicament warring against a blinding headache. As he climbed the stairs to find some painkillers, he overheard Lucy on the phone, catching only her side of the conversation. He couldn't help but wonder who she was talking to and listened intently to her part of the conversation. "What are you doing, sending Fred away?" "No, it's a terrible idea. This situation isn't working out, and your presence will only make it worse. He hasn't come up with any other solutions. It seems like he's given up and resigned to things. This isn't how I expected things to go. He's absolutely devastated. You know I enjoy our time together. I suggested it, but I didn't anticipate him being this upset. It was supposed to be a safe alternative to us having an affair without the risk of being caught. I didn't mean for all of this to happen. I didn't help matters with the kisses and breakfasts, and you've been unnecessarily cocky at times, flaunting it in his face. Fine, you can come over during the trip, but then I think we'll have to dial it back and be more discreet, or maybe even end it. If you're willing to end things because you see how it's affecting Fred, then you can be the good guy and we can go back to normal. Perhaps if we're discreet, we could still meet occasionally. We'll talk later, but I really need to mend things with Fred. I still love him." Fred staggered back down the stairs, feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. Did he really just hear all of that? He couldn't quite grasp all the implications. It was no surprise that Bill seemed to anticipate all his plans. Lucy was keeping him informed ahead of time, and it was her idea from the start. She had suggested it and persuaded Fred to borrow the money against his better judgment. That also explained how Bill found the discrepancy in the first place. It was so well hidden that he didn't think even an audit could uncover it. Far from being married to a saint who prevented him from going to prison, he was, in fact, married to a conniving cheat. Thoughts of revenge and violence raced through his mind. Feeling overwhelmed, he knew he had to calm down and think rationally. He needed a plan, one where they would feel some of his unease. Fred avoided Lucy for the rest of the night and the following morning. When he saw Lucy on Tuesday night, he didn't mention the overheard conversation, but instead said he'd heard Bill at work, writing about having a first-class mistress. Fred continued, saying he could only hope Bill hadn't mentioned Lucy by name. Fred left early for the trip on Wednesday, with Lucy telling him she loved him. He managed a brief smile and pretended to be distracted by checking his schedule on his phone as he set off. Bill arrived at Lucy's later on Wednesday morning, and she immediately asked about the boasting, but Bill denied all knowledge of it, accusing Fred of stirring things up. Lucy wasn't sure who to believe. She couldn't see any reason for Fred to make that up. Maybe Bill was less discreet than she thought, which would be problematic. They discussed the situation and what could be done about it. Lucy lacked the emotional connection she had with Fred, and what she had with Bill had been reduced to a purely physical relationship. Before leaving on Thursday afternoon, Bill had convinced Lucy to continue their affair, but Lucy made it clear that it would be their last time together until they got their relationship with Fred in order. As Bill left the house, he froze in disbelief at the sight before him. Embedded in the gleaming hood of his Porsche 911 was a large kitchen knife, standing upright. He scanned the area, finding no one around. All 4 tires had been slashed as well. Rushing back inside, he informed Lucy. Panic set in as they wondered if Fred had returned early and discovered something. It seemed likely, unless it was the work of kids or someone envious of the flashy car. Vandalism wasn't new to them. Lucy called Fred, asking about his course. He nonchalantly mentioned its dullness, stating he was on his way back. He didn't inquire about Bill and sounded calm. Lucy concluded that maybe it was just kids after all. Regardless, they needed to tow the car before Fred's return, resulting in frantic calls and hefty fees. Things seemed normal when Fred returned on Thursday night. Lucy treaded carefully, playing the dutiful wife. It came as a surprise when Bill messaged, expressing his intention to come over on Friday to discuss their situation. Lucy hoped Bill would end things. Perhaps the incident with the car had shaken him enough. Friday morning, Fred left for work as usual. At 11 a.m., he called Lucy in a panicked voice, urging her to see something. He had received a video clip via their personal email. Lucy opened the email on her phone, located the message, and played the video. Despite its poor quality and short duration, it was clear what Lucy and Bill were doing in the bedroom. The sender was an anonymous address. Fred looked at the video on his phone, puzzled. Is that our bedroom? It's hard to tell, but it looks sunny, like midday. I'm not sure when that would be from. Lucy, knowing exactly what it was from Wednesday, responded calmly, I'm not sure, maybe it's edited, and they messed with the light. That is you, isn't it? Fred asked, observing Lucy in the video. You seem to be enjoying it. Lucy let the comment pass. She had more important things to worry about. She could explain her enthusiasm to Fred later as part of an act for Bill. What's Bill playing at? Is this what he wanted to discuss tonight? Is this just another form of torture? You didn't fall out or threaten him, did you? Fred's questions came one after another. Lucy immediately denied it, but then remembered telling Bill of her intention to stop things. Maybe he reacted badly and intended to use the video to keep things going. He must have set up a video at some point. He had plenty of opportunities over the past 2 days. Fred mentioned Bill wasn't at work, so he couldn't ask him. Lucy desperately wanted to contact him, and still hoped to cover their activities in the previous few days. Just then, Lucy's phone pinged with an urgent call me now message from her sister Mandy. She told Fred she had better answer it, hoping it would give her some much-needed thinking time. She ended the call with Fred and dialed Mandy, only to be greeted by a barrage of questions and expletives. When Mandy finally paused for breath, Lucy managed to establish that her sister had received the same video clip. Her phone kept bleeping with attempted calls from most of her close friends, and even her mom. My God, had they all received the clip? This was an absolute disaster. There was no way Fred would do this to me. It had to be Bill. Lucy was furious. She tried calling Bill repeatedly, but couldn't get a reply. Unbeknownst to her, Fred had picked up Bill's phone at work during a conference meeting, removed the battery, and discarded it. He kept the handset and SIM card. Additionally, Fred left an envelope on Bill's desk before making the call to Lucy about the video and quietly leaving work. When he got home, Fred thoroughly enjoyed watching his wife's angst and confusion. Lucy was distraught at the thought that her family and friends might think she was having an affair, especially her mom. Fred played along, offering various useless suggestions on how to limit the damage. He feigned confusion about when the clip could have possibly been taken. However, Lucy still wasn't admitting to Bill's midweek visit. Lucy, how had everything gone so horribly wrong? She had never entertained the idea of having an affair until that fateful night at the party, when she had a little too much to drink and flirted with Bill. He was charming, attractive, and clearly interested. Since that night, he had occupied her thoughts more often than she'd care to admit. Over the following weeks, she managed to justify to herself that she deserved some excitement, but she couldn't risk her marriage to Fred. She had seen a friend's marriage crumble after a similar affair was discovered, but she always considered herself smarter, believing her plan was a clever way to avoid all the pitfalls of getting caught. After all, how could Fred discover something he already knew about? Planning the details became part of the thrill for her. From her perspective, it was a perfect arrangement, but she never fully considered the impact on Fred. Now she found herself in a world of pain. Everyone adored Fred. And now, they would all know she had betrayed him. The thought of facing the consequences made her grimace. Nobody would believe that Fred was aware of her and Bill. However, none of that mattered as long as she could convince Fred that this wasn't her fault. Bill's arrival at Fred and Lucy's home was announced by screeching tires. He was met by Lucy's attempt to attack him, with Fred doing nothing to intervene, his cheek marked by an impressive scratch. After finally managing to pin Lucy against a wall to speak, Bill denied any involvement in the video, despite having heard about it. Lucy seethed, questioning who else could have done it. Amidst the tension, Fred burst into laughter. "I suppose that would be me," he admitted. Both Lucy and Bill were dumbfounded, but it was Bill who grasped the situation first. "So you found out about our meeting this week?" he asked. Fred confirmed, "Yes, unfortunately." Lucy attempted to justify the video as a continuation of their arrangement, but Bill realized the full implications. He knew they had discussed everything, suspecting Fred had recorded it all. Attempting damage control, he apologized to Fred, acknowledging his mistake. "I'm truly sorry, Fred. I couldn't resist Lucy. I never meant for this to hurt you so much. I made a big error in judgment and got carried away. I'll end the arrangement and overlook the financial irregularity." Fred replied, "Ah, that's very kind of you, but unfortunately, it's all a bit too late. You'll find my resignation on your desk." Lucy interjected, "You can't leave, Fred. How will we pay for the house?" "Don't worry about that, Lucy. It's going up for sale tomorrow," Fred assured her. Bill jumped in. "There's no need, Fred. We can put this behind us. I really need you at the firm. You know the business and the clients inside out." Fred smiled. "I suppose that's true. It's probably why your main competitor has offered me a job. I suspect some, maybe even most of the clients, will move with me. And you owe me more than the 4-week notice period, so I won't be coming back." Bill's fake smile faded as Fred continued, "I suspect a good portion of the workforce will follow me too. I've informed them of my departure, and many don't seem to believe you're capable of keeping the company afloat." Bill tried to rally. "You need to think this through, Fred. You could still go to prison." Fred chuckled. "Oh, I highly doubt that. Would you want to implicate your lover? She received half of the benefits of the fraud. Besides, you've committed blackmail, and thanks to our little conversation here, I have that admission on video. It's amazing what electronic devices you can buy these days. The recording is with my lawyer. And in addition, you might find some of your files have been accidentally deleted. I know you didn't back up anything remotely. It pays to have colleagues who enjoy working with you, but I suppose you wouldn't know that." Bill sneered. "That recording won't stand up in court." Fred responded, "Interestingly, my lawyer echoed the same sentiment, but I can utilize it in other ways, and by the time it's resolved, you'll likely be out of business. On the bright side, my new firm might be interested in acquiring you. I hear their new chief operating officer is a decent guy." Lucy realized that Bill's business and money were in serious jeopardy. She decided to pin it all on Bill. Bill listened in disbelief as Lucy launched into an impressive act of a wronged woman. "I love you, Fred." This was all Bill's idea. He made me do it. I admit I got confused and carried away, but I was just going along with it to save you from prison. I didn't really have a choice, and because of that, my life is in ruins. Please, Fred, I love you." Bill muttered, "You two-faced liar." Fred smiled at the rather apt description. "Ah, my dear loving wife. In addition to the video, you're overlooking the fact that I overheard you on the phone admitting this was all your idea, a rather elaborate and cruel cover for an affair. You'll find divorce papers in the envelope in the kitchen drawer. You're leaving tonight, and will agree to the terms of the divorce, or more of those video clips might find their way to family and friends. I'm sure your mom will love to hear that not only are you a cheating slut, but the extent to which you plotted and blackmailed." Lucy burst into tears and slumped to the floor. Fred looked at Bill. "Do you want to take her with you?" Bill replied, "Not a chance. More trouble than she's worth." Fred said, "Well, on that, we are agreed." Bill warned, "This isn't over, Fred." Fred replied, "That's true." With that, Fred swung for Bill. He wasn't sure who was more surprised as his fist crunched squarely into Bill's jaw, felling him on the spot. It's over now. Epilogue. Fred had listened to the recording countless times. Most of it was agonizing to hear, but he found himself drawn to the part where Bill and Lucy were fretting over whether he had discovered the truth and lost his sanity. The knife in the bonnet was delightfully melodramatic, and the act of it brought his first genuine smile in weeks. Taking up the new job with Bill's rival, Fred found himself quickly gaining customers and employees. Bill clung bitterly to his failing business, but eventually had to concede defeat, putting his firm into administration. Rumors swirled about personal bankruptcy, and shortly afterward, Bill moved away from the area. Lucy found herself in a small flat, using the money from the sale of their house as her sole income. With few qualifications or experience, she juggled 2 temporary jobs on 0-hour contracts, barely making ends meet. Former friends turned their backs on her, and her relationship with her family dwindled to barely a whisper. With his increased salary and bonuses, Fred was able to cut back to a 3-day work week, finally making time for the sports and outdoor activities he had neglected during his marriage. He hadn't realized how much Lucy had influenced his decisions, including buying a large house and filling it with possessions. Waste no time, he sold it off. Remaining in contact with Lucy's family, particularly Mandy, who repeatedly apologized for her sister's affair, Fred couldn't help but wonder what Mandy meant by suggesting she never make the same mistake. The thought of teasing out that meaning, especially to see Lucy's reaction, amused him greatly. Admittedly, it had been a challenging year, not just for Samantha, my wife, but for all of us. For years, I worked for a company specializing in custom fasteners for manufacturers. When a company creates a product, they can't just go to the local hardware store and buy screws. Everything has to be made to their specifications. Beginning in sales, I steadily climbed the ladder to become the sales manager. It was a rewarding position, both professionally and financially. Meeting all 4 quarterly quotas, which I consistently did, ensured a substantial year-end bonus, often pushing my earnings well beyond the 6-figure mark. Despite the growing competition from overseas manufacturers, I led a dedicated sales team that consistently outperformed previous years. About a year ago, a sudden meeting summoned all company executives, myself included. Shockingly, we learned that the company's owner was retiring and had been in clandestine negotiations with a California conglomerate for a buyout. We were being sold off. The arrival of a new CEO brought promises of job security and continuity in management, promises that quickly proved false. Within a mere 2 months, the company began a wave of layoffs. Sensing the impending changes, I began actively seeking new employment, but the inevitable came before I secured another position. With a handshake and a modest severance check of $10,000, I found myself escorted out the door. Initially, Samantha and I remained relatively optimistic, but as the months elapsed, I began to grasp the shifts in the economy that had occurred during my tenure in my comfortable job. Not only had much of the manufacturing relocated overseas, but even many domestic firms were sourcing their fasteners internationally. I pondered over how we managed to maintain our resilience amidst such changes, but dwelling on that was a luxury I could no longer afford. I needed to secure employment. During this period, our 17-year-old son, Donald, was graduating from high school. His decision to enlist in the military immediately after graduation elicited mixed emotions for me. With the ongoing turmoil in the Middle East, concerns for his safety loomed large, and naturally, both Samantha and I anticipated missing him terribly. On the other hand, there was a sense of relief, knowing that we wouldn't have to bear the financial burden of college expenses, which, frankly, we couldn't afford. Around 5 months post-termination, it became increasingly evident that finding another 6-figure job would be challenging. I adjusted my expectations and began considering positions with lower salaries. Meanwhile, Samantha decided to seek employment as well. Surprisingly, she secured a job before I did, landing a position as a junior secretary at a software company. Though the pay was modest, it exceeded what I received from unemployment benefits, providing some relief during our financial strain. About a month after Samantha landed her job, I secured a sales position at Enlight Automotive, a company specializing in aftermarket car parts. During the initial couple of months, I earned a nominal salary while undergoing training. Subsequently, I transitioned to a compensation structure consisting of both salary and commission. Realistically, it was never going to be a lucrative position. The highest-paid salesman in the company had been there for 12 years and barely made $60,000 annually. The strain on our finances was palpable. We were accustomed to the trappings of affluence, a comfortable home with a solid mortgage, 2 BMW sedans, only one of which was fully paid off, mine, a 5-year-old BMW 5 Series, and a collection of credit cards, most of which were already maxed out. Moreover, Samantha and I sorely missed our evenings out on the town. It was a cherished aspect of our lifestyle, a testament to the notion that enjoying life was just as important as financial success. We used to frequent restaurants with friends, indulge in dancing, catch shows, plays, or concerts whenever the mood struck us. Our outings weren't scheduled date nights. Rather, we spontaneously embraced opportunities for enjoyment, typically 2 or 3 times a month, sometimes even more frequently. Regrettably, one of the first casualties of our financial cutbacks was our social life. The adjustment seemed to weigh heavier on Samantha than on me. Unlike me, who only began to enjoy outings in college, Samantha had grown up accustomed to frequent socializing with her family, making the transition particularly difficult for her. Months had passed since our last night out, and Samantha's frustration was mounting. She couldn't bear another evening cooped up at home. About 3 months ago, she finally voiced her discontent. "Calvin, we have to do something. I can't stand another night stuck at home. I want to go out and have fun like we used to." Samantha's plea couldn't have come at a worse time. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through our bills, attempting to slowly but surely climb out of our financial hole. "Sure, no problem," I responded sarcastically, gesturing towards the stack of bills. "Just tell me which of these we shouldn't pay." Her glare pierced through me. For a moment, I thought she might explode, but she remained silent, her thoughts guarded. Almost immediately, I regretted my tone. "I'm sorry, honey," I apologized. "I promise this won't last forever. I'm still searching for a better job. In the meantime, we just need to tighten our belts a bit." "Tighten our belts?" She snapped back. "Calvin, it's been nearly a year. I feel like I'm suffocating. I need to breathe, to have some fun." "I understand, honey, I do," I reassured her, attempting to soothe her frustrations. "But look, we're making progress. 5 months ago, we missed a mortgage payment and almost lost your car to repossession. With this month's check, we'll be nearly caught up. Just give it a little more time." Samantha's expression remained tense. She wasn't convinced, and I couldn't blame her. Then an idea struck me. "What if we go to Lincoln Park Zoo this weekend?" I suggested eagerly. "It's free, and we haven't been there since Donald was little." "I don't want nature, Calvin. I want nightlife," she retorted sharply. "I want to dine, drink, and dance until I can't feel my feet." "Honey, please," I pleaded, "just a bit longer. Once we're caught up, we'll celebrate with a nice dinner out, I promise." Silently, she retreated upstairs, leaving me to mull over the situation. A heavy sigh escaped me. I truly felt remorseful. However, the reality of our financial constraints lingered in my mind. Living in Chicago meant that a simple night out, with parking and dinner for two, easily amounted to a couple $100s, if not more. Raised in a household where prioritizing bills was paramount, I couldn't justify such expenditure while we struggled to stay afloat, barely managing the minimum payments on our credit cards each month. It took me another 10 minutes to wrap up my tasks. As I contemplated watching the news, the thought of Samantha upstairs prompted me to check on her first. Entering our bedroom, I found her perched on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down her face. Guilt washed over me as I sat down beside her, pulling her close. "I'm sorry, babe. I'm trying my best," I murmured, resting my cheek against the top of her head. "I know," she sniffled. "It's just been such a tough year. And now with Donald gone, we should be planning weekend getaways. Instead, we're stuck here. It's almost like being imprisoned. I thought debtor's prison was a thing of the past," she scoffed bitterly. It was unfortunate that she didn't notice the simmering anger on my face as she spoke. Our house, labeled as a prison, elicited a visceral reaction within me. I never wanted to purchase it in the first place. It felt too extravagant and burdensome. However, once Samantha laid eyes on it, she insisted on making it ours. Now, as I struggled to maintain it amidst financial turmoil, hearing her refer to it in such disparaging terms stung deeply. I faced a choice: confront her about her analogy, or simply walk away. I opted for the latter. In the following months, tensions between Samantha and me escalated. Our conversations dwindled, becoming terse and devoid of meaning. We found ourselves occupying separate spaces within our own home more frequently. Samantha didn't hold back her dissatisfaction with me, particularly regarding our lack of outings. I understood her desire for a reprieve, but I couldn't ignore our precarious financial situation. I agreed that we both needed a release, but I insisted on prioritizing our bills before indulging in leisure activities. Despite my promises of a future night out, her discontent persisted. Tensions reached a tipping point one Friday evening after work. I returned home in unusually high spirits, having just sealed a promising contract. With the commission awaiting me at month's end, I looked forward to treating my beloved wife to a memorable evening. However, before I could share the news, I was met with an unexpected sight. As I entered, Samantha descended the staircase, exquisitely dressed to the nines. "Wow," I remarked, taking in her appearance. "What's the occasion?" "I'm heading out with some coworkers," she replied, her tone tinged with sarcasm. "Don't worry, they're footing the bill." Instantly, a sense of unease washed over me. Something felt off. While I had never doubted Samantha's fidelity, her choice of attire and the mention of her friends covering expenses didn't sit right. My wife was a woman of pride, unlikely to accept such generosity without cause. It didn't align with her character to accept charity from others. The possibility of her rendezvousing with another man lingered in the back of my mind, causing a chill to run down my spine. "Aha, and who exactly are these girls? Can you at least tell me their names?" I pressed, my concern evident in my tone. She shrugged off my question with a dismissive wave. "Just some coworkers from the office. You wouldn't know them." "That's not the point, Samantha," I countered, frustration creeping into my voice. "You don't dress like that for a casual outing with girlfriends. Who are you meeting? Do you have a date with someone else?" "Don't be ridiculous," she retorted casually. "I already told you it's just a girls' night out. If you're going to be paranoid, that's your problem, not mine." At that moment, a car horn sounded from outside. Peering through the window, I spotted a cab waiting in our driveway. "You're taking a taxi?" "Yes, I plan to have a good time tonight. We both know we can't afford a DUI, so I thought it was the sensible choice." "And let me guess," I snapped, my anger rising. "Your friends are footing the bill for that too." "As a matter of fact, yes, they are," she confirmed, leaning in to give me a quick peck on the cheek. "There are leftovers from last night in the fridge. You can heat them up for dinner. I might be out late, so don't bother waiting up." With those words, she breezed out the door, leaving me seething with frustration. As Samantha slipped into the back seat of the car, I couldn't discern anyone else accompanying her. Denial briefly consumed me. Despite the evident tension between us, I couldn't fathom the notion of my wife actually meeting another man. We had a son, a life built together. She wouldn't betray that, I reassured myself. It simply couldn't be true. While I mechanically reheated leftovers in the microwave, a storm of doubt brewed within me. I desperately wanted to believe Samantha was merely enjoying a night out with her coworkers, but reality gnawed at my resolve. Driven by a growing sense of unease, I turned to the computer and swiftly located the number for the taxi service. Upon reaching the dispatcher, I requested the destination of the cab that had just departed from my residence, providing my address as reference. Surprisingly, the dispatcher didn't raise any privacy concerns, readily disclosing the information. Plato's Place, 3560 Elmhurst Road. My heart sank. I knew the establishment all too well. Samantha and I had dined there on a couple of occasions. It was a romantic restaurant with an intimate bar area, dimly lit and secluded, certainly not the setting for a casual evening with girlfriends. No, Plato's Place was the kind of place where a man would take a woman to woo her, to seduce her. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, shattering my illusions of innocence. As the buzzer signaled the completion of my dinner, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Weren't husbands and wives supposed to unite in times of hardship, not betray each other? I toyed with the idea of dining alone at Plato's Place, contemplating my next move. The establishment boasted 2 entrances, one for the lounge and another for the restaurant. Opting for the lounge entrance to bypass the hostess, I bypassed the bar, uninterested in a drink, and headed straight for the dining area. A quick scan of the room confirmed my worst fears. There sat my wife, accompanied by another man. Though her back was turned, her silhouette was unmistakable. They conversed over appetizers, a bottle of wine already adorning the table. Rage simmered within me as I fixed my gaze upon the interloper attempting to woo my wife. With purposeful strides, I closed the distance between us. As I approached the man, Mr. Slick, as I mentally dubbed him, suddenly halted mid-sentence, his demeanor shifting to one of apprehension. Our eyes met, and his nervousness was palpable. Just as I drew within a few feet, Samantha glanced over her shoulder, her expression morphing from surprise to guilt as she beheld my presence. "Calvin," she exclaimed, taken aback, "what are you doing here?" "I came to meet your girlfriends," I retorted bitterly. "And who's the jerk?" "Hey," he interjected, beginning to rise from his seat. "Go ahead, make a move," I warned, my voice tripping with threat. "You know damn well she's married. But I guess that doesn't matter to you, does it?" He hesitated, caught between standing and sitting, while my wife attempted to diffuse the tension. "Calvin, please, let's not make a scene," she pleaded. "This is Keith. He's a coworker. Since you won't take me out," he offered. "He was just trying to be kind." "Kind? My foot," I growled. "He's just trying to get in your pants." I could tell he thought better of challenging me, sinking back into his seat. "Your night's over," I informed my wife firmly. She hesitated briefly, but like Keith, she opted not to test my resolve any further. "I apologize for this," she said to Keith as she stood up. As I led her out of the restaurant, I could feel the weight of every gaze upon us. Not a word was exchanged during the tense car ride home, but the moment we stepped into the house, the air crackled with tension. What was that all about, Samantha? Tell me. Have you suddenly decided I'm no longer worthy of being your husband? I demanded, my voice laced with anger. No, of course not. I just wanted to have some fun for a change, she replied defensively. Who is this Keith? How long have you been seeing each other? I interrogated, my frustration mounting. He's just a coworker, and we haven't been seeing each other. We've had lunch a few times. That's all. I mentioned missing going out, and he offered to take me for dinner and dancing. So I accepted. So sue me, she retorted sarcastically. I can't believe this, I muttered, feeling stunned. I thought our marriage was stronger than this. Are you ready to bail on me at the first sign of trouble? Who said anything about bailing? I work too, you know. I deserve to enjoy myself once in a while. If you won't take me out, why should I turn down someone who will? She shot back, her tone defiant. Because you're my wife, damn it. I raised my voice, my frustration boiling over. We're supposed to be a team. She didn't respond, but the disdain in her expression was evident. Is this what our marriage has come to? Do I have to worry about who you're with when you're out of my sight? What were your intentions for the end of the night? Were you planning to sleep with him? I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. Of course not, she replied abruptly, her tone firm. I gazed at the woman who had been my partner for nearly 2 decades, and for the first time, doubt clouded my perception of her integrity. I don't believe you, I uttered firmly. You deceived me about going out with girlfriends, showing little concern when I doubted you then. Why should I trust you now? Yes, it's been a challenging year, but a wife is supposed to stand by her husband. Remember our vows, for richer or poor, in sickness and in health. In that moment, clarity washed over me like a wave. Our marriage is over, I declared, the words heavy with finality. Her response was dismissive. Don't be absurd, she scoffed. We're broke, remember. You can't afford a lawyer, let alone a divorce. Hell, you can't even afford to move out. I longed to deliver a cutting rejoinder, but I was too stunned to formulate a coherent response. It seemed some people were ill-equipped to confront adversity. It was evident that she no longer loved or respected me. After 19 years, my marriage had disintegrated in the blink of an eye. Anger surged within me, stifling any urge to break down and weep. Without another word, I ascended the stairs to begin packing the suitcase. After a tense 10 minutes, Samantha finally approached, her voice sharp with accusation. What's this? She demanded, eyeing my packed suitcase. Oh, I see, you can't take me out to dinner, but you can afford a night in a motel. Fine. Her words rang out as she stormed out of the room. Enlight Automotive outsourced much of its inventory production overseas, but we still had some items manufactured in-house. Adjacent to the offices was a small plant, complete with a spacious shower room for the workers to freshen up before heading home, and a couch in the reception area, a shower and a place to sleep. That's all I needed for now. As I descended the stairs with my suitcase, Samantha was in the kitchen. She called out as she heard the door open, but I didn't pause to listen. I hastily threw my clothes into the car and departed without a word. I hadn't even gone a mile down the street before my phone began to ring incessantly. Strapped in with my seatbelt, I couldn't reach it, so I let it go to voicemail. Yet my curiosity got the better of me, and as soon as I arrived at the office, I retrieved my phone from my pocket, pondering what Samantha might have to say. Calvin, you're being childish, her voice echoed through the voicemail. I told you I had no intention of sleeping with Keith, and I meant it. Now get your ass back home. It was far from the apology and plea for reconciliation I had expected. I decided to leave most of my belongings in the car. No need to advertise my personal turmoil to everyone at work. It was still early, so I retreated to the break room, hoping to distract myself with some TV. Yet my troubles weighed heavily on my mind, rendering any attempt at diversion futile. I couldn't shake the nagging thought of what might have transpired if I hadn't intervened at the restaurant. Would Samantha truly have returned home after a night of dancing? The uncertainty gnawed at me, exacerbated by my distrust of that slimy Keith. He didn't strike me as the type to give up easily. I could envision him relentlessly pursuing her until he got what he wanted. Frustrated with my futile attempts to occupy myself, I eventually resigned, setting an early alarm to allow me to shower and dress before the factory workers began arriving at 7. As I lay in bed, wrestling with my thoughts, I pondered my next steps. Samantha was correct. I lacked the financial means for a lawyer or even a new apartment. I needed to devise a plan. Yet, her blatant disregard for our marriage, and for me personally, left me with a resolve not to grovel back home with my tail between my legs. I was pleasantly surprised when the alarm roused me from sleep the next morning. I couldn't believe I managed to rest so well on that uncomfortable couch. It felt more like a medieval torture device. After a quick shower and dressing, I headed to a nearby restaurant for a leisurely breakfast. As I sat sipping my 4th cup of coffee, a sudden epiphany struck me like lightning. The solution to my predicament seemed so obvious, yet it had eluded me until now. Returning to Enlight's parking lot, I pulled out my cell phone and snapped a photo. Once seated at my desk, I wasted no time in running the ad. 2 days later, I took the afternoon off to attend to some errands. With Samantha at work, I seized the opportunity to retrieve the necessary documents from our personal filing cabinet at home, grabbing the spare set of keys on my way out. Later that day, I checked into a motel and dialed Samantha's number. As soon as she heard my voice, she launched into a tirade. "It's about time. Are you done with your little hissy fit now? I can't believe you couldn't find the money to take me out to dinner, but you can stay in a motel for 2 days. Samantha scolded as soon as she answered the phone. "Actually," I interjected, cutting her off, "I stayed at the office." "The office? Yeah. They have a shower, a nice comfortable couch, and a TV room, all the comforts of home," I replied, stretching the truth. Her response was more of the same. "Well, that's just ridiculous. Stop being so stubborn and come home." "I'm not coming home, Samantha. I've made it clear. Our marriage is over. I called to let you know you'll need a ride home." "What? Why? What's wrong with the car?" "Nothing," I answered calmly. "It drives like a dream, better than mine." There was a moment of silence as she processed my words. "Calvin, what are you talking about? I sold my car, got 18 grand for it. That's more than enough to get a lawyer started on the divorce and a down payment on an apartment. And since both cars are in my name, I took yours. I stopped by the house earlier today and got the titles to both cars and the spare keys to yours." "Calvin," she shrieked in disbelief. "You can't do that. What am I supposed to drive?" "Actually, since both cars are in my name, I can do that. I didn't take anything out of the accounts. All the bills are paid for the month, so there wasn't much left. But if you budget, you should have plenty for food and cab fare. And if you run low, I'm sure Keith will be more than happy to take you out for dinner, provided you give him what he wants, of course." Suddenly, Samantha's tone shifted to one of remorse and pleading. "Calvin, please don't do this. I never thought you'd really go this far. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gone out with Keith, but I was angry. Honestly, nothing was going to happen. Samantha, you lied to me, went on a date with another man behind my back, and then treated me with disdain and showed absolutely no remorse when I caught you. Admit it, Samantha, you don't love or respect me. You made that plain as day with the way you talked to me the other night." "Calvin, I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry too, Samantha. We had a good run when life was easy, but when things got tough, we let each other down," I replied, my voice tinged with resignation. I was taken aback by a sob from the other end of the line, but it made no difference anymore. I pressed on. "The house is in both our names. It's our one decent asset, so it needs to be sold as quickly as possible," I explained, hearing her gasp. "Sell the house. Calvin, do we have to?" she pleaded. "Samantha, right now, we're up to date with the mortgage. But I'm not making any more house payments, and there's no way you can cover them every month. Yes, it has to be sold immediately. I estimate we each should be able to walk away with $50,000 or $60,000. You can use that to buy yourself a decent used car and find an apartment. Calvin, I don't want a divorce. Please, can't we talk about this?" she implored. "Sorry, Samantha, it's no longer about what you want. Now, do you want to call a realtor or should I?" Epilogue. Samantha stood on the sidewalk outside her apartment, her gaze drifting up to the gray sky as a flock of geese honked their way northward, a reassuring sign that spring was on its way. She navigated through the melting slush, making her way to her 10-year-old Chrysler, and headed towards Starbucks to meet an old friend. The anticipation of seeing Chloe brought a smile to Samantha's face. It had been a typical Chicago winter, cold temperatures, abundant snow, and treacherous roads, keeping Samantha mostly confined to her apartment when she wasn't at work. Inside Starbucks, Chloe had already claimed a small table in the corner, savoring her latte. Samantha greeted her friend with a kiss on the cheek before joining the line for her own Colombian brew. As she waited, Samantha relished the chance to catch up with a friend, appreciating the opportunity to step out and enjoy some company. Returning to the table with her coffee, Samantha was met with a warm smile and a familiar voice, brightening her day even more. "Samantha, it's so good to see you. It's been a while," Chloe greeted, her voice filled with warmth. "Yes, it has. Too long," Samantha replied, a hint of melancholy in her tone. "I don't get out much anymore." "Why is that? You were the life of the party back in the day." "Yeah, well, life was simpler then. I don't have the money for outings like I used to." "What about dates? Remember those? Going out with a handsome man who foots the bill," Chloe teased. Samantha chuckled lightly. "It's a bit of a catch-22. Can't meet men if you don't go out, but can't afford to go out if you're not with a man." "What about guys at work?" "Dweebs and married men, nothing exciting," Samantha countered. "Let's change the subject. It's a bit depressing. How are the kids?" "Oh, they're thriving. Lucas Jr. just got a promotion, and Emily is already in her 3rd year of college. They grow up so fast, don't they?" "They really do," Samantha agreed. "Donald has 1 more year in the military, and he's already considering re-enlisting. He enjoys it. How's your husband?" "Lucas is doing well, as hardworking as ever." Samantha noticed the hesitant look on her friend's face. "What's up?" "Oh, nothing," Chloe replied, looking a bit sheepish. "Come on, spill it. You were about to ask me something." "Well, I was just curious if you've seen Calvin lately." "No, not since we finalized the divorce," Samantha said, reminiscing for a moment. "Wow, that was 2 years ago already. Why do you ask?" "I just wondered. I'm not sure if I should tell you, but I think you should hear it from a friend." "What is it, Chloe? Is everything okay with him?" "Yeah, he's fine. I bumped into him the other day and, well, he's getting married again." Even though she had long accepted the end of their relationship, the news still hit Samantha hard. She felt a lump form in her throat as tears threatened to spill over. "I guess I'm not surprised," she admitted quietly, her voice heavy with sorrow. "He's a good man." Her gaze fell to her hands, fidgeting with the coffee cup. "Sometimes I look back at what we had, and I wonder how I could have been so blind." Taking a sip of her coffee, she lifted her eyes to meet her friend's gaze. "I did love him, you know. Truly, I did. But when the bills piled up and the stress mounted, I lost sight of what mattered. I just wanted an escape from our problems, a bit of fun." Chloe listened in silence, offering her presence and understanding. "Calvin was right about everything," Samantha continued, her voice tinged with regret. "I lost respect for him, maybe even stopped loving him for a while. It wasn't fair, Losing his job wasn't his fault, and he was doing everything he could to keep us afloat. She paused, a pang of guilt washing over her. I remember when he suggested we go to the zoo one weekend, but I brushed him off, insisting on my night out instead. He was even right about Keith, Samantha admitted, a sense of remorse evident in her voice as she recounted the painful memories. That was the guy he caught me having dinner with. Calvin asked if I had plans to sleep with him, and I did. Chloe, I had every intention of doing just that. Chloe's expression softened, her empathy palpable. Oh, Samantha. Yeah, I know. Samantha sighed heavily, her regret weighing heavily on her. Believe me, Chloe, if I could go back and do things differently, I would. Is he still in that little apartment he moved into? Chloe hesitated, unsure how to broach the topic. Actually, no, you didn't hear, she began cautiously. What now? Did he hit the jackpot, or something? Samantha asked, half-jokingly. Chloe shook her head. Not quite, but he did get his old job back at Enright Automotive. It happened a few months after your divorce was finalized. Apparently, they started losing customers after they let Calvin go. So they reached out to him, and he eventually accepted. And get this, he's making more now than he ever did. A tear slipped down Samantha's cheek as Chloe finished speaking. I'm sorry, honey. I shouldn't have brought it up. No, Samantha replied, shaking her head. It's my own fault. There have been so many nights where I've wished I could turn back time, prayed for the last 2 years to just be a bad dream. But then I wake up and face reality again. She wiped away her tears with a napkin. I genuinely am happy for him. Please tell them that for me if you see him again, okay? I will, honey, Chloe promised, her voice filled with sympathy. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and the friends enjoyed each other's company. But as Samantha drove away and the facade faded, she couldn't hold back her tears any longer, breaking down in the solitude of her car.